All right, let's set a scene. You're at your favorite coffee shop, you need to get some work done, so you hop on their free public Wi-Fi. It's something we all do, right? We barely even think about it. But what's actually happening to your data on that open network? So you're logged on, you're checking emails, maybe doing a little online shopping. Everything feels totally normal. Your data's just zipping from your laptop to the router and out to the internet. But, it's what you can't see that really matters. And that's the big question, isn't it? On an open network, that digital conversation you're having might not be as private as you think. This is exactly where the world of ethical hacking comes into play. It helps us understand these risks so we know how to protect ourselves. Okay, before we dive any deeper, let's get one thing straight. When we say hacking here, we're not talking about the bad guys. We're talking about the good guys. Think of them as the digital locksmiths of the internet. So ethical hacking, or what professionals call penetration testing, is all about finding the weak spots in a system before a real attacker can. It's a whole profession dedicated to testing defenses to make them stronger. And today, we're going to focus on one very specific technique they use to check out our network security. All right, so how would an attacker actually listen in on that coffee shop Wi-Fi? Well, one of the most common ways is something called network sniffing. And honestly, it's pretty much exactly what it sounds like. The best way to think about it is like wiretapping an old school phone line, but for your internet connection. A sniffer is basically a piece of software that can watch and grab all the little bundles of data, we call them packets, that are flying through the network. And if that data isn't protected, whoever is sniffing can read everything. This really shows how attackers adapt. See, on older networks that use devices called hubs, an attacker could just passively listen in, because the hub would just shout all the data to every device connected. But our modern networks use smarter devices called switches. So attackers had to get clever, and they developed active sniffing, which is a way to trick the network into sending them your data directly. But how do they actually pull that off? How do they force your data to come to them? Well, it all comes down to telling a very, very convincing lie at a really fundamental level of the network. The weak spot here is a protocol called ARP, which stands for Address Resolution Protocol. Its only job is to match up a device's digital IP address with its physical hardware address. But it has one fatal flaw. It was designed back in a time when networks were, well, more trusting. It basically believes anything you tell it without asking for any proof. And here's how that trust gets exploited in a really slick three-step deception. First, the attacker's machine quietly tells your computer, hey, I'm the router, send all your internet stuff to me. Then it turns around and tells the router, hey, I'm that person's computer, send all their incoming data to me. And since the protocol is so trusting, both your computer and the router just believe these lies. And just like that, the attacker becomes the person in the middle, seeing every single thing you send and receive. And don't think this is some obscure, super difficult attack that takes a genius to pull off. There are powerful, easy-to-find tools out there that can automate this whole process, which makes it pretty accessible to anyone with a little bit of know-how. So an ethical hacker might use a tool like Wireshark, which is really the gold standard for digging in and analyzing all the raw data they capture. But then there are other tools like Ettercap that can literally automate that whole man-in-the-middle attack we just talked about. These are the exact tools used to both test network defenses and, in the wrong hands, to break them. Okay, I know, that all sounds pretty scary. But remember the whole point here. Understanding a threat is the very first step to defending yourself against it. So how do we build that digital shield? So here's the crucial thing. If your data is sent in what we call plain text, which just means it's not scrambled or encrypted, this is literally what an attacker sees. Your username, your password, maybe your credit card number, all of it, completely readable. But if your data is encrypted, well, it looks like this. It's just complete and utter gibberish to the attacker. They might be able to grab the data, sure, but they can't make any sense of it. Encryption is, without a doubt, the single most powerful defense you have. So what are the big takeaways for you here? For just everyday protection, two things are absolutely key. First, always look for that little lock icon and HTTPS in your browser's address bar. That tells you your connection to that website is encrypted. Second, especially on public Wi-Fi, use a VPN, a virtual private network. A VPN basically creates a secure encrypted tunnel for all of your internet traffic, which makes this kind of sniffing attack almost useless. And that brings us full circle, doesn't it?
We've seen how the attack works, and more importantly, how to defend against it. But with this kind of knowledge comes a really, really important responsibility.
I really can't stress this enough. Understanding these concepts is for defense and for professional authorized testing. Using these tools or techniques on any network you do not have explicit written permission to test is illegal, and it carries very serious consequences. The entire profession of ethical hacking is built on a foundation of trust, clear documentation of what you find, and, above all else, consent from the system's owner. If you're interested in learning more, you have to do it the right way. Use safe, legal, sandbox environments like TryHackMe or Hack the Box. They're literally designed for you to practice these skills without breaking the law.
So, to wrap it all up, we've basically learned how an attacker can eavesdrop by tricking the network and how encryption is our main defense. It's like reinforcing the door and putting a better lock on it. But networks have more than just doors. What about the walls? What does it take to get past a firewall? Well, that's a question for another time.